Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about moderating and assessing writing at the end of Key Stage 2. That's the end of Year 6. It's been a while since I did a video and we are now post-SATs. So the only thing left really in regards to Year 6 is the teacher assessments of the children's writing. So there is no test for assessing writing at the end of Year 6. The teacher has to sit down with a number of children's pieces across the year and then decide, looking at them, what grade they are going to give to the children for writing. Now, the grades are split up into three different grade boundaries. You have working towards the expected standard, which you can see here. You've got working at the expected standard, and then you've got working at greater depth. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing working towards the expected standard and what that looks like, and then what a child should be at the end of Year 6, which is what their writing should look like if they were working at the expected standard. So just first of all, to look at the parts of the TAF, which you can see here. The TAF is the Teacher Assessment Framework. Now, this video is also for teachers who are looking to go through what's called external moderation, where somebody comes into school and just validates your judgments. So this is also for teachers who are going through that process, and some information and advice on how to assess the children at different levels and how to prepare for that external moderation. So for working towards the expected standard, the TAF states that the children must write for a range of purposes. They must use paragraphs to begin to organize ideas. In narratives, they should be able to describe settings and characters. In non-narratives, that they should be able to use simple devices of structure, such as headings and subheadings. They must use capital letters, full stops, question marks, commas for listing, and apostrophes for most contracted spellings. They must try to spell most of the Year 3-4 words correctly, and then some of the words from the Year 5 and 6 list. And their writing must be legible, which means we should be able to read it. But there's no requirement for the writing to be joined. Now, from a moderating perspective, usually when the child writes at working towards the expected standard, the thing that is missing and the thing that really jumps out at you is that idea of cohesion. Now, cohesion is when the writing makes sense and you can follow it from start to finish. The sentences relate to each other, and you don't feel at any point like you have been kicked out of the child's writing. Now, just to explain this in a little bit more detail, being kicked out of writing is like when you're reading a piece of writing and then suddenly feel, oh, that's a little bit confusing, or that didn't quite make sense, or I'm a bit lost here. Now, if you're having that feeling when reading a piece of writing, that's usually a good indication that the child is working towards the expected standard and not at the expected standard. So first of all, the children across the year should be writing for a number of different purposes. Now, if you have only got evidence for children writing stories in their books, you really have to look again at your planning and try to plan in the next few weeks for some different genres, because across the year, the children should have been given an opportunity to write for 4 different reasons: to inform, entertain, discuss, or persuade. And here you can see a variety of different ways you can get the children to write for these purposes. For example, short stories for entertaining. If they write an informal letter, that's for informing. Persuasive, obviously persuasive letter. Diary for entertain, speech, monologue, play, script, newspaper report. And then more sort of newer genres would be things like emails, blogs, online reviews, not forgetting poems, and then finally advertisements. So these are all the different types of writing that you should be getting your children to do throughout the year, and these would make for sufficient evidence. Okay, so once again, if you just have one type of writing in your books, then it's really a good idea to look back at your planning and seeing where you can plan for these different genres. So, working towards the expected standard. So this is a piece of writing taken from the exemplifications which the government give to teachers as good examples of what working towards might look like. First of all, let's start by reading one. Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day is very important to us because of the soldiers that died in World War I. It is known as Poppy Day or Armistice Day. People celebrate Remembrance Day on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. People wear poppies as they were the first ones to bloom on the battlefields of Flanders. Their bright red colour symbolises to blood that the soldiers lost in the war. There are white and purple poppies. White poppies are worn by pacifists. White symbolize of peace, and purple poppies are still produced by one charity called Animal Aid. It not that soldiers lost their life, animals lost their life too. So straight away you can see that this is a short piece, okay? And there are some parts of it that, let's look first at what the child is actually doing. So mostly throughout we can see correct punctuations being used and correct capitalization. So we've got capital letters at the beginnings of sentences, we've got full stops used at the ends of sentences. We've got capital letters for pronouns such as Remembrance Day. However, we have some places where an occasional capital is used in the wrong place. So in the word people here, we've got an inappropriate use of a capital. Also, another good indication that this is not expected is if we look down here, we have some examples of expanded noun phrases, so bright red colour. Okay, so we have got some description here, but not in any great detail. Also, further down here, we can see that that we do end up being kicked out of the writing a little bit, like I spoke to you before. It says, produced by one charity called Animal Aid. It not that soldiers. So here we actually have a missing word. So it's not. Okay, I think it should be it's not that soldiers lost. And here we see the life. And correct, if this was written correctly, it should be there, using the correct use of there, and the correct spelling of there, and the plural of life, which is lives. So here you can see how the cohesion of the piece, the way we're kicked out, and it doesn't quite make sense, is because we've got some word omission, we've got the incorrect use of there, and we've got a plural missing here. It's not that soldiers lost their lives, possibly some punctuation missing here. It would be a good place to put in a dash. Animals lost their lives too. And again here, we're missing an incorrect there and the plural of lives. So that just gives you an indication of what a working towards piece of writing would sound like, and some of the things that you would see that gives you an idea that it is working towards and not expected. Looking at the same child, but a different genre. So like I said before, they should be writing for different purposes. This is a letter. Let's go ahead and read it and see what it sounds like. Dear Princess, how is everyone? Is everyone all right? I am overwhelmed by be fearful at the same time, because my friend George was brave for fighting, but he wasn't lucky for surviving and got shot 5 times in his face. Joshua nearly got shot in his head. How are the twins, Snowball and Lightning Dust? How is the cat Tom? Still fat? I miss him terribly. What about you, my love? How are you? I think of you every day and every night. When the war is over, we will go on holiday somewhere. That is all for tonight. Love from Terrell. Okay, so where to start? Right. First of all, again, we've got the correct use of a capital letter at the beginning, and we have got some different type of punctuation here. For working towards, they do have to evidence use of question marks for questions, and it looks like we've got that. How is everyone? Is everyone all right? I am overwhelmed. So we've got an incorrect spelling of overwhelmed here. And also this bit here, again, you heard that I was almost kicked out here. I am overwhelmed. Be fearful at the same time. I'm imagining this is an incorrect use of the word be, and it should actually be but, okay, which is the word that's missing here, which would help with the cohesion. We have got, though, some subordinating conjunctions for cohesion. So we've got the word because being used. Because my friend George was brave for fighting, and we've got some coordinating later on. He wasn't lucky. So once again, an incorrect use of a capital letter there. For surviving and got shot 5 times in his face. I think we should have some punctuation here, but it's missing. So some sort of pause, full stop probably. Joshua nearly got shot in his head. How are the twins Snowball and Lightning Dust? Again, another correct use of a question. How is the cat Tom? Okay, another question. And also a self-correct here. A capital letter for a proper noun. So Tom has been given a capital letter. Still fact. I miss him terribly. What about you, my love? That's quite nice. How are you? Okay, that shows a little bit of character there. I think of you every day and every night. When the war is over, so we've got some subordination here. When the war is over, we will go on holiday somewhere. Again, an incorrect capital used there. That is all for tonight. Now, another interesting thing about this piece is the abruptness of the ending. So this is also a reason why it wouldn't be expected regarding the cohesion. The letter seems like it's about to go on somewhere, but then is suddenly cut off. So when the war is over, we will go on holiday somewhere. Maybe as a reader, you're thinking they might talk about the holiday or tell us something about it, but instead it cuts off quite suddenly. That is all for tonight. Love from Terrell. So here you can see 2 examples of what would be working towards the expected standard. I like to say that these 2 pieces, from working in year 2 as well, which is another SATS year at the moment, these pieces look more like what would be an expected piece at the end of year 2, with the type of punctuation being used, the subordination, the coordination. So really, when you're looking at working towards, that's the kind of standard you're looking for. And if you feel at any point that you're being kicked out of the writing for some reason as a reader, something just doesn't sound quite right, and that's a good indication that it's what you're looking at is a working towards piece. Okay, so let's move on. What about working at the expected standard then? Now we should see a real jump now in the quality of the writing, in the length of the writing, and in the cohesion. So this should really follow more smoothly on. The points should be more connected, more linked. There should be cohesion between paragraphs. So let me read you a little bit, and that will hopefully give you an idea of what expected at the end of year 6 would sound like. This is a story, so we should see some narrative techniques and features, some speech, some description. So let's have a look. Happy 13th birthday, Anna. Annabeth's mother exclaimed loudly, while handing Annabeth her birthday present. Thanks, Mum, she grimaced, but you really didn't have to get me anything. Ah, come on, I didn't. Suddenly, Anna tore off the blue and pink polka dot wrapping paper and laughed. Wow, thank you so much. It's just what I needed. She smiled at the neon blue pumps. Okay, I'm going to go and try them on. She got up and walked to the couch. Oh, wait, dear, there's another present. The excited mother was holding a rectangular box wrapped in brown, crusty paper. Anna stared at the present with sadness. She knew what it was. She knew that as soon as she opened it, she would weep. Okay, she cried. I always try to forget about that. Her mother, now whimpering, placed it gently in Annabeth's cold peach hands. It's okay, she said, sighing. You don't have to open it. Anna's mother stroked her daughter on the back. No, Anna murmured, while letting her tears fall in like raindrops. I'll open it. She tore off the mud-coloured wrapping paper and fell on her knees. Dad, Annabeth cried. Suddenly, everything started to shake. Everything started to disappear. Everything was gone. Exactly, gone. Soon it was just Annabeth and the photograph of her family. Darkness. Mum, she asked with bewilderment. Mum, where am I? All of a sudden, Anna fell and fell and fell, then landed on a mossy surface. The light found itself again. But she was not in her stark living room like she was seconds ago. Annabeth found herself lying on a battlefield. Slowly she got up with confusion in her head and fear in her eyes. She looked around and noticed a figure, a tall figure, with dark hair and ocean blue eyes just like hers. Soon after there were 5 more figures. 10, 11, thousands. She turned around with fear and legs ready to run. But she couldn't run. She was planted in squelching mud, mixed with scarlet blood. Before she knew it, there were millions of injured and bloody soldiers lying on the muddy ground. Ah! She screamed with affright while trying to move her feet, but they wouldn't budge. She needed to get out. She needed to go, but how? Suddenly she remembered the photo. Maybe that was the way back. Back to home. Back to her mother. She started to search around, but she could not find the picture. It was gone. Annabeth allowed her clear tears fall freely down her cheeks. Anna knew it. This was the end. Okay, so before I go on and read any more, and it does go on a little bit after that, straight away you can hear the difference. Okay, and you've got the piece is a lot longer to start off with, and I should say that your piece of writing doesn't have to be long. It's just that this story, because it's a full story, is quite a long piece. But don't be thinking that all pieces of writing are expected to have to be long. That's definitely not the case. So let's look back at the TAF now and see what this writing had in it. If a pupil is working at the expected standard, the kinds of things we should have seen, okay, write effectively for a range of purposes. Now that goes back to and audiences, this examples of genres. So really, if a moderator is coming into your school, they're going to ask you to show a range of pieces, okay? Not just one type, but many different ones. And that's what you would do. You would go through the child's writing literacy book and look for those pieces. Looking at that child's writing then, we read a story, but we would probably go back and look at a few different pieces. But what did we see in the story? So, selecting language that shows a good awareness of the reader. Well, it was obvious that the girl who was writing that knew that she was trying to entertain. Okay, so she had a good awareness of the reader and a good awareness of the purpose of the writing, because it was an entertaining piece. She described the settings, characters, and atmosphere. There were descriptions of how the character felt. Okay, we will come back to that in a minute. Integrate dialogue in narratives to convey character and advance action. There was definitely some of that, which we'll look at in a second. Select vocabulary and grammatical structures that reflect the writing requires. So using contracted forms in dialogues in narratives. So this relates to formality. So if characters are talking and it's an informal conversation, we would see those contracted forms of spelling. Using passive verbs to affect how information is presented. Using modal verbs to suggest degree of possibility. Okay. Use a range of devices to build cohesion. So we should have seen some conjunctions, some adverbials of time, some pronouns. Okay, and we should have seen writing organized into a paragraph. So use verb tense consistently. So the tense was the tense consistent, and punctuation taught at Key Stage 2, mostly correct. Inverted commas, that's speech marks. And we would have seen some sort of sophisticated punctuation, colons, semicolons, things like that. Spellings mostly correct from the Year 5 list, and the handwriting was legible, and we could see some evidence of joining. So let's go through now and have a look. So straight away we can see a good use of speech marks here, inverted commas, and the narrative begins with some speech, which is quite a nice way to begin a story, rather than the typical once upon a time. This child's thought carefully about how they want to start the story and decided to start with some speech. Correctly used with the punctuation inside. We've got the correct use of an apostrophe possession here, so that's punctuation taught at Key Stage 2. We've got the use of an adverb to show how her mother is speaking. And this here, we've got speech to convey character, because it says that her mother exclaimed loudly. And then further down, we've got speech that conveys action. So, thanks, Mum, she grimaced, but you really didn't have to. Ah, come on, I did. Further down, we've got, I'm going to go and try them on. So we've got speech to move the story on, which is further down here. So we've got dialogue used for both conveying character and for moving the story and action forward. Okay. The excited mother. So this is a really nice example of a pronoun. Now, sometimes a child will use pronouns, but they'll only rely on he, she, him, her. But this is a more sophisticated pronoun because instead of saying, Annabeth's mother, she's changed it to the excited mother, which is another example of how this child shows cohesion through using a synonym. Okay, we've got here some description. This lovely description of the rectangular box wrapped in brown, crusty paper, which I thought was a nice expanded noun phrase here and very appropriate. You can imagine as the reader that brown, crusty paper you get when you're opening a present. Further on, what else do we see that suggests that it's expected? She knew that as soon as she opened it. Oh, Anna stared at the present with sadness. So we've got a nice adverbial here, correctly used and punctuated with a comma. All right, this is something you should see in an expected child's writing. So if you're looking at your own children's writing, do they use adverbials? Do they correctly use commas? Oh no, she cried. I always tried to forget about that. Her mother, now whimpering, placed it gently. So we've got more adverbials here in Annabelle's cold peach hands. Again, lovely description, a lovely expanded noun phrase. An expected child would always be looking to describe things, particularly in a narrative. They're describing settings and people. Correct use of a possessive apostrophe. Anna murmured while letting her tears fall like raindrops. This is a lovely example of show not tell. So rather than telling the reader, Anna was sad, they're showing it by saying that teardrops were falling down her face like raindrops. And good use of figurative language here with a use of a simile. The writing flows, you can follow it. I'm sure when you were listening to me read that story, we weren't kicked out at any point, and the paragraphs flowed and related to one another. There was no random points. We didn't feel lost at any point. Further on then, so we've got she tore off, so a good use of the word tore here, so a verb for effect, and it's also a correct use of the irregular verb, which is she, instead of tear, we've got tore rather than teared. The mud-coloured wrapping paper is quite nice and appropriate. We've got suddenly here with another adverb with a comma. Everything started to shake. Everything started to disappear. Everything was gone. Lovely repetition here and a description of a setting for effect to move the narrative on, to sort of make the narrative almost pick up the tempo a little bit, to show that there's a different part of the story starting. And then we've got here use of semicolons, so you can see that sophisticated punctuation, and again ellipsis at the end. So really this person knows how to use these. Punctuation taught at key stage 2. All of a sudden Anna fell and fell and fell, so more repetition for effect, then landed on a mossy surface. The light found itself again, but she was not in her stark living room like she was seconds ago. Anna found herself lying on a battlefield. Okay, so just moving on into this now. I mean, looking at that piece, if we go back to the TAF, was there anything that we couldn't see? I believe that we could see most of these things. Description of setting, we had a description of characters, and we had that lovely repetition to create that atmosphere. We had dialogue to convey character, and we had dialogue to advance the action. There were contracted forms of spellings when used in dialogue. I suppose modal verbs suggest degrees of possibility. If we looked carefully, we'd probably find some. There were conjunctions there. There was a range. We had adverbials of time. We had that lovely pronoun about her mother and synonyms. Instead of just saying Annabeth's mother, we had that there. And the verb tenses were consistent. We saw that good use of the word tore, which was a good use of the irregular verb tear. And we had the correct use of speech marks. So far, looking at this one piece of writing, you would say that this child was working at the expected standard. Now, just to reiterate, it's really important that you go back into your child's books and make sure you have these range of genres and purposes. We would say, based on that one piece, that the child was working expected based on the narrative, but we want to see that across a range of pieces. So could we see her doing the same in a speech, a diary, a newspaper report as well, possibly an online review? So yeah, you want to see the child evidencing those things across a range of genres. Thanks for watching, guys. The next video I'm going to do will be about writing at the greater depth standard, which is a little bit more tricky to assess, and we'll be needing a whole video to go through that. But thanks for watching, and tune in to the next video where we'll be helping you to assess children at a greater depth level. Thanks a lot. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and thanks again to everybody who supported the channel so far.